Hello, welcome to Aliasoft webinar. My name is Alejandro Delgado, Technical Director of Aliasoft, and thank you for joining us today in the first session of a new series of webinars with the topic Prospects for the Energy Markets in Europe, Spring 2021. Today, we have two guest speakers from Ernst & Young that will discuss about the main novelties in the regulation of the energy sector, the financing of renewable energy projects, the importance of the PPAs, and the business opportunities abroad. The speakers will be Antonio Hernandez Garcia, partner of regulated sectors at EY, and Javier Garcia Seijas, partner of infrastructure, modeling, and project finance at EY. Unfortunately, an unexpected family emergency is preventing our other speaker, Uriol Salto, data analysis and modeling director of Aliasoft, from connecting at the beginning of the webinar. But hopefully, he will join later to talk about the evolution of the European energy markets in the past months and the outlook for the coming spring. If you have any questions at any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A menu and we will answer them after the presentations. And now, I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Javier Garcia will begin with an introduction to EY. Javier, please share your slides. Javier, if you can activate the camera and the audio, please.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Also, my camera is working?
No, we can see you.
I will try. Sorry. I can.
Yes, now we can see you.
Great.
You stop the sharing the presentation?
Yeah, and hopefully you can see me and also you can see the presentation.
Yes, now it's fine.
So thanks for Alejandro for introducing me and EY. I'm, as you said, I'm the partner in charge of infrastructure advisory, modeling, and project finance at EY Spain. And today we would like to talk together with Antonio about energy markets perspective in Europe and also the opportunities that we see on this regulated sector. To begin with, I would like to make a short introduction about EY capabilities, our approach to the market, and how we support our clients. We support all type of clients, starting from large utilities, renewable developers, also financial investors, even governments and multilateral institutions. We support them and we try to help them with our energy team that is globally connected, and with Spain, for instance, more than 300 people working at every moment in every phase of the development of an investment or every energy development that we see from the beginning in the pre-development through the construction, acquisition, operation, disposal, and also during the repowering and decommissioning. In each of these stages, we connect all our capabilities in our different areas. We have a strong strategy and transaction practice where we can support doing obviously M&A, financial due diligence, even liquidity solutions. Also, we are doing obviously valuations and project financing, modeling. All this we can support our clients through the deal at early stages, or even if we are in brownfield projects doing, for instance, financing or other kind of support. Also, we have a tax practice. Our tax practice is doing tax structuring, tax planning, transaction tax, tax due diligence, all this that is absolutely needed when an investor or utility is trying to develop projects. Also, we have a legal practice that can support our clients through the whole cycle. So we work together, tax, legal, financial advisory, and we all try to do this in the whole cycle of the investment. Also, we have, obviously, we are an assurance company, and we can really do audit and even compliance and some other kind of works in this line. Also, when there are disputes, we have a service that can advise in disputes. That is quite. It was quite common in the past, and we have very good credentials on that. And also in consulting, as Antonio will explain later on, we can advise on all regulations. And Antonio is an expert of that. Also was the head director in the general ministry. Was a general director in the Ministry of Energy. So he will explain how we can advise on regulatory issues, on regulatory questions, and all this. Also, I mean, digital analytics, managed service, economic regulatory, that is Antonio. All this we do through our consulting practice. So we have gone through the strategy and transactions when we are talking about deals. We have gone through assurance when talking about doing audits or even disputes and compliance. We have gone through tax, talking about this tax structuring, legal structuring, transaction tax planning, and finally consulting. And well, we also have a people advisory service where we can explain our clients the needs of their workers, and even advise them in expatriate tax services, organizational design, compensations. Well, this is an additional service. So just to summarize and to go to our webinar that is more interesting, but we had to explain first what EY do and how we are organized globally and locally, providing this advisory to all kinds of companies through all the cycle of the investment. We wanted to show you that our organization, how is it, which is our approach to advise our clients well through all the cycle and with all our capabilities that I try to summarize through tax, assurance, consulting, strategy and transactions, and tax. And also myself, and just to finish the presentation from my side, and let Antonio start. I will be back later on with modeling project finance and trying to explain the financial conditions that we see in the market in the different type of investments in renewable energy that we see in Spain after Antonio's presentation. And just to, before introducing Antonio, I just thank you all for being here. And please, Antonio, go ahead, I try to introduce shortly yourself, saying that you was the head, general director during previously the Ministry of Energy, but you will be able to explain yourself better. And thanks for going through your presentation. I will be back later on and we'll explain about the financing conditions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Javier. And of course, thank you very much, Aleasoft, Alejandro, Antonio. So I would like to share the screen. If you want, Javier, I can share it.
You want me to share?
No, I can do it. It's okay now? It's now
yes.
okay?
Yes,
okay.
We can see good.
Thank you very much. Okay, after this introduction from Javier, I'd like to talk about the main regulatory issues in the Spanish energy sector, and mainly related to the renewable sector itself. The idea of my presentation is to analyze this topic, which is very relevant within the energy transition, as and a very huge opportunity for our economic recovery, not only in Spain, but also in Europe and in many other countries. You know, energy transition is related to investment. Investment in the case of Spain will be very relevant, close to 240 billion in the next 10 years until 2030. And as far as the investment is a key component of the GDP and the GDP growth, this effort in investment will be essential for our economic development in the next and economic recovery in the next years. So talking about investment, which is a variable for the long term, the medium term, because on the long term, as Keynes mentioned, we were all dead. So for the medium term, talking about investment, it is very relevant. All the efforts to have certainty in this for this variable, and regulation is key, and economic policy is key for maintaining this certainty for investors. So in my presentation, I will try to analyze three main topics. On the one hand, the most relevant planification in the case of Spain related to renewables. In the second hand, which are the most relevant regulations which will be essential for these targets in our planification with a vision not only 2030, but also 2050. And finally, the role of investment funding and principally the role of European funds, next generation funds, in the case of Spain and in the case of the energy sector. So talking about the first issue, the planification, we have to take into account the draft law on climate change and energy transition, which was passed by the government last year in May, during the the worst period of the pandemic in Spain. And this draft law includes minimum targets for 2030 in terms of emissions, in terms of renewable deployment, and also in terms of energy efficiency. The minimum targets which have been increased in the planification, as we will see later on, 20% reduction of emissions, 35% at least in the participation of renewables in the energy consumption, final energy consumption, and 70% share in the electricity mix. You know, last year we closed our mix with a 44% participation share of renewables in our mix. It's very relevant. And also in terms of energy efficiency to reach at least 35% reduction on primary energy consumption. In the Vision 2050, two main goals, carbon neutrality and also 100% participation of renewables in the electricity mix. We will see this later on. In this draft law, the Council of Ministers is authorized to review the targets, taking into account the European Union regulation on the one hand, the Paris Agreement on the other, and also the technological, changes in the different technologies. As I mentioned, around 240 billion would be invested until 2030, with 38% of this amount in renewables, 35% in efficiency, and 24% in networks and electrification process. And in this, it is very important as far as the role of networks in our GDP growth for the next years and in our planification. There is one amendment which has been proposed at the Parliament, talking about the increase of the limits of investment in networks. As you know, the new electricity law of 2013 introduced a limit. Networks should be increased, taking into account the GDP growth. This limit was increased because of COVID, but perhaps with these new amendments, there would be another increase in network limits for the next years, which is be essential for the electrification process of Spain. The second is, the so-called PNIEC, our National Plan Integrated on Energy and Climate, which is the main tool of the government to comply with these ambitious targets. The reduction of emissions would be higher than the figure established in the law, around 23% in relation to 1990. But if we analyze the period 2005-2030, the ETS sectors will reduce these emissions by around 61%, and diffuse sectors such as residential, transport, and agriculture close to 40%. As I mentioned, the renewables in final energy consumption will be relevant also, around 42% in 2030, with an effort in all the different vectors. Transport, 28 renewables, thanks mainly to electric mobility and biofuels, over the required percentage established by the European Union. Cooling and heating, important also the development of the so-called renewable energy communities and the promotion of heating pump, more use of heating pumps. And finally, in electricity, as I mentioned, renewables sharing 74% of the total electricity generation and 100 in the Vision 2050. In this slide, it's important to see our capacity planified for 2030 in the electricity mix. As we can see here, close to 74% of the 161 gigawatts would be related to renewables, but also we will have presence of the combined cycles, as we can see here, which will have a key role for providing the thermal backup to renewables for the intermittency. Also nuclear will be also there. So these technologies which provide firmness to the system and also thermal backup should be maintained, and then their viability should be considered. So some measure could be implemented in order to maintain this viability. In this slide, we can see the role of wind and solar in the coming years. The role of renewables, we will have to add around 60 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. Auctions will play a key role, apart, of course, of other plants with PPAs and other plants going to the market directly, because now they are competitive. And also, as I mentioned, some capacity payments or other measures should be introduced for other technologies which are providing this thermal support and firmness to the system. This is very important for our energy policy to reduce our dependency rate, which is close to 70% today and will be reduced to 61% by 2030, taking into account the competitiveness of Spain in wind and solar. We don't have hydrocarbons, but we have solar capacities, abundances, and wind abundances. So in terms of competitiveness, if we use the Porter's analysis of competitiveness, we have everything in Spain. We have the regulation to support this deployment. We have the abundance of resources. We have the demand, which is very demanding. And also we have a very competitive sector in renewables. So Spain will have the opportunity to provide this competitive raw material for our renewable hydrogen. So hydrogen is being included in a roadmap until 2030 with a Vision 2050, which will be a solution to achieve our climate neutrality. But at that time, Spain has the opportunity to become a benchmark in this, also for supporting fair transition areas in which some coal plants and in the future some nuclear plants will be decommissioned. And then in the coming years, the industry that uses hydrogen as a raw material, they have a great potential, such as oil refining, fertilizers, and chemicals. In the medium term, other areas would be interested in this, such as urban services or intermodal transport nodes, such as ports, airports, and logistic platforms. And then in the vision for 2030, Spain considers the possibility of having around 4 gigawatts electrolyzers, and by 2024, around 300, 600 megawatts. That means in the coming years, an investment of close to 9 billion euro. And of course, this roadmap will be updated every 3 years. Another roadmap, very interesting for us, is storage. You know, the Council of Ministers passed last month the roadmap for storage with ambitious target, 20 gigawatts by 2030, 30 gigawatts by 2050, including large-scale storage and also, you know, more storage related to self-consumption. And for me, it is important to highlight the role of pumping. You know, pumping today is a reality in Spain, but I think personally that pumping should be promoted. You know, pumping is a mature, is an efficient, is a flexible technology with great potential in Spain because we have many reservoirs, many potential dams, and then it is important to provide this necessary backup or storage capacity to the penetration of renewables. So perhaps a capacity mechanism should be introduced to attract these technologies and other technologies which will be essential to provide, as I mentioned before, the necessary firmness to the system. So after having analyzed the planification, I would like to talk about the concrete regulations in terms of renewables. For me, the first one would be Royal Decree Law of last year, 2023-2020, which introduced many measures for our energy system, but I would like to highlight 4 of them. The new retribution system for renewables through auctions. Secondly, the orderly deployment of access and connection to electricity networks to overcome the problems of the former regulation. Thirdly, the promotion of energy efficiency. And finally, to promote also new business models, talking about demand aggregators to involve demand in the transition and also energy communities. Talking about the retribution for renewables through auctions, there are mainly 2 big regulations, the Royal Decree 960 and Ministerial Order 11861 from the end of last year, and also the resolution with the first auction of last December. You know, in this new system, retribution is given through auctions in a pay-a-bid scheme. So the participant offers a strike price to the system. Then the participant has a kind of PPA with the system for a period, around 12 years, with no counterparty risk. So the price of this PPA is different from the other private PPAs. And as you can see here, also the regulator, the ministry introduced a calendar for auctions. This is very important because, as I mentioned before, investment is a long or medium-term variable, and all the measures providing certainty to investors are essential. So the first auction it was held at the end of January, 26th of January. It was a success because we have more than 80 participants offering more than 3 times the capacity of the auction, which was 3 gigawatts. Only 32 companies were successful, with an allocation of almost 2 gigawatts to PV, to solar PV, and close to 1 gigawatt to wind, with an average price of 24. You know, this price is different from the ones in the Portuguese system, because here the auction is not related to access and connection, but only to renewables deployment. This is very important. And also, as I mentioned before, this PPA with the electricity system is for part of the time of the installation. So the business model, of course, of the investors is not only related to this PPA, but to the whole period of the plant. Of course, these plants are sharing the market with other ones which have signed private PPAs and other merchant plants. And in the medium term, the RES deployment will find synergies with electric vehicles, aerothermia, self-consumption, and of course, green hydrogen. And all this new demand will be essential to avoid curtailments. Talking about the networks, the access and connection to the networks, it is very important to take into account that the new regulation have solved the problems of the previous one. In the previous regulation, the requirements for access permits were not very stringent and not sufficient to guarantee that the projects with these access permits were going to be deployed in the future. So we have an excess of demand of these access permits. We can see here in this slide more than 70 gigawatts of excess only in the case of photovoltaic technology, 10 in the case of wind, and then it was necessary to introduce a new system. Mainly Royal Decree 1183 and Circular 1/2021 from the CNMC, our competition commission. For me, it's very relevant to maintain this clear separation of responsibilities between the two main regulators, the ministry on the one hand, in charge of our energy policy, and the CNMC on the other, in charge of competition and other technical issues. This new regulation avoids inefficiencies and speculation with a clear procedure and regulated deadlines. It is much more transparent than the previous one, with the obligation to publish all the capacity available every month, which is very relevant for investors and for an orderly deployment of our renewables and all the targets. Also, optimization of the network. It is possible now to have an installed capacity bigger than the access capacity, and also has introduced the hybridization, mainly related to renewables and storage. And in some cases, not in all the cases, only in some cases, and if it is necessary, some contests will be introduced. This is different from the Portuguese case, because we were, helping some Spanish companies to participate in the first auction. So in some cases, they were worried about the prices. We were trying to help them with a model and also with our regulatory analysis and economic analysis in order to differentiate our auctions with the previous auctions held in Portugal. Also, we were helping them to find potential partners for this. And then it is very important to distinguish the difference of Spanish regulation with other regulations and our planification in renewables on the one hand and access to networks on the other. And finally, I would like to talk about the draft law on the National Sustainability Fund for the electricity sector, which main goal is to withdraw from the electricity system part of the financing of renewables and cogeneration in a progressive way. It is in 5 years on a linear basis. I say part of the financing because, also this fund will be financed by the revenues coming from taxes introduced in 2013 in Spain, which are paid by nuclear plants and also hydropower, and also will be financed by the auctions related to CO2. So in this case, all the energy vectors, not only electricity, but also oil and gas, will be financing this. And then in order to avoid problems in some cases, some products have been exempted to pay for this, such as kerosene, diesel, in the case of agriculture or fisheries, and in some sectors which are have the risk to for carbon leakage and also of international competitiveness have been exempted in the regulation. This is very closely related to the reform of our, taxing in the electricity, which I think would be revised in the coming months or years. And finally, I would like to speak about the funding of these investments and the role of European Union funds. As you know, there are for the whole European Union around 750 billion in the recovery instruments. And from the 7 recommendations of the European Commission in order to destine these funds, 3 of them, such as Power Up, Renovate, and Recharge and Refuel, are directly related to the energy sector. And others, such as the promotion of digitalization, are indirectly related also to the energy sector. In the case of Spain, we will receive around 140 billion, half of it in terms of transfers, and taking into account the role of energy, around 37% of the budget would be destined to measures having an impact on climate. In the case of Spain, and in the case of the energy sector, we have 8 expressions of interest in different topics, such as green hydrogen, renewable energies, smart grids. And in our case, in EY, we are supporting companies in order to succeed in this, because there are many projects, there are many companies, and the money should be destined to the most relevant projects, the ones with an impact close, more related to all the targets: employment, development of fair nodes, fair transition zones, and also this is very important to choose the ones which are more relevant. We are helping the companies to do this, and also to prepare the documents, and in the coming future to prepare the documents for the announcements, because the expressions of interest are only expressions of interest, no rights, no obligations for anybody. It's only a measure for the ministries to know which is the interest of the companies, and the relevant thing would be the participation in the different convocatorias, in the different announcements will be published in the next months, and would be essentials for Spain to promote this investment. So thank you so much, and I'm at your entire disposal for any question. I don't know if Oriol is already here. So thank you, and I pass the floor to my colleague Javier. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Antonio. I will start sharing also the presentation from my side. Yeah. So thanks, Antonio, for your introduction and the conversation. Now we would move shortly, because I have good news that Oriol Salto from Aliasoft is also joining us. So after my conversation, Oriol will explain his predictions. So if we focus, and I will then try to be not so very long and try to go straight ahead to the matter. Financing conditions for renewable energy projects here in Spain. So if we are going to talk about this, we should have a clear view on 4 different types of projects. We will first talk about projects subsidized by Royal Decree 413 of 2014. Later on, we will move to projects with PPAs. We will also touch pure merchant projects. And finally, we will go to the most recent project awarded in REER tenders. So this will cover mainly all kind of projects we are seeing. We are seeing lots of these projects advising or raising financing, doing modeling reviews. So we are very close to the market. I think we are the leading consulting firm in this area. So we have a lot of information. I will try to explain it shortly. So if we first talk about project subsidies of the Royal Decree 413 of 2014, we have seen, I think, hundreds of refinancing transactions in the past years. This is due because this regulative framework is very stable. It has visibility and balancing of the tariff deficit, granting subsidies that will ensure project adequate return. Also, when it was updated in the Royal Decree 17/2019, this reinforced it for this stability for the next coming 12 years. So refinancing has been very active once well, at the beginning in the 2014 there was some restructuring, but later on, and the 2019 there has been just pure refinancing, where we have leveraged much more the projects when they got the stability with the final returns that we will explain later on. There are a lot of lenders interested in this kind of projects, more than 15 national and international lenders with whom we are talking in the Spanish market. So this is a very attractive projects. The leverage is really high, from 80 to 90%. The debt terms are up to 22 or 23 years. And what is interesting is that is even with negative tails after the subsidies granted by the Spanish government. If we talk about the days service coverage ratio, we have to dimension it with two different periods. If we are talking about the subsidiary period, we are around the CR of 1.15. If we go to the negative tail during the merchant period, the DCCR is about 1.35, which can be required. The RI until 2032 is 7.398, as known, and after that from 4.5 to 7.09. The energy production scenarios will be about usually considered for the sizing is 10-year P90. Lenders normally accept third-party advisor low medium price estimations. Pricing, other debt conditions. Well, interest rates range from a minimum of Euribor plus 1.25 to a maximum of Euribor 2.40. As you see, is probably the cheapest way of financing these kind of projects. There is a hedge required by lenders around 70 to 75, and the structuring fees are around 2%. The required debt service is usually of 6 months. So this is it has been very active, not only for refinancing, but also for transactions. And when they do transactions later on, they refinance. And we have been hundreds of this kind of subsidized projects of the Royal Decree of 2014, updated on 2019. If we move to one of the trends nowadays, is the projects with PPAs. It's a tendency that is growing in Spain. It was not at the beginning, but now we are seeing each day more. The PPAs can be found in all those types of refinancing and acquisition financing and greenfield financing also. Actually, there are not so many banks doing as in the other projects, but at least 8 lenders we know that they are active in our Spanish market to finance renewable energy projects with PPAs. Well, the credit risk of the lenders is directly related with the counterpart risk or the PPA of takers. Therefore, the credit quality of the PPA's counterpart will be crucial in the project's bankability. If the PPA credit profile is poor, but the characteristics of the PPA are still interesting for the company, there are still some formulas that of credit enhancement that still could make some financing possible. Obviously, it's better to have counterpart risks that are fully acceptable. The debt sizing parameters here we see that are less leverage than the previous kind of projects, but still they have a quite high level of leverage, around 75 or 80%, depending on the lender and on the quality of the PPA. The maximum debt term is around 15 or 18 years. You see that the difference between projects, and but even I have to say that it's common to find cash sweep mini perm structures to reduce the term, so they probably will not last so long. Sorry. The debt service coverage ratio during the PPA period is around 1.15 to 1.35, and after the PPA period, then the conditions are worse, and we are talking about 1.45 to 1.50. The energy production scenario usually considered as usually is a 10-year P90. Lenders require their own price estimation on third-party advisors, so they will hire advisor from their side for the debt sizing purposes. If we move to pricing and other debt conditions, we have here a little bit more expensive interest rates, Euribor plus 175 till a maximum for Euribor plus 3.25, and subsequent step-ups to 3.75. Hedge is, as in the other projects, around 70 to 75%, and street rate is also about 2%. They require debt services ranges from 6 months in the PPA to 12 months in the merchant period. Now we move to the merchant projects, which is still on the market, is the less popular for them in the moment, and just 3 to 5 national and international lenders we see really active. They are also used during the financing, greenfields, and other these types of projects. You can see merchant projects. Well, by comparison to the PPA project, for merchant projects does not encompass a relevant credit risk, as the offsetting of the revenues is really the energy market and is very liquid. The problem, or let's say the circumstances, is that the projects will be significantly less leverage. So 55%, I think, is the average. But I mean, if we are optimistic, we could reach to 65%. Also, the debt term are like in the PPAs from 15 to 18 years, but also with cap sweep and mini perms that will reduce these terms. While the debt service coverage ratio is in the high range, is from 145 to 150. Like, I mean, it's like in the other projects after the PPA. And the energy production scenarios, debt sizing is a 10-year P90. The lenders normally require their own price estimations on third-party advisors. They will have their advisors. Pricings, here we have the most expensive from 225 to the 3 Euribor plus 225 to Euribor plus 325, also with subsequent step-ups. And lenders will require interest hedge at least 70%. Structural fees, 12%. The required debt service reserve account is usually of 12 months. So now, if we move to the most recent projects and what we are seeing in the REER tenders, I have to say that this is a combination of PPAs and merchant. I mean, you have a PPA of Antonio explained it before really well. You have a combination of kind of PPA, but with no counterpart risk because it's the overrun during 12 years, and after that you will have a merchant project. So according to this, well, the first tender, I will explain the conditions with a short introduction that the first tender of the Régimen Económico de Energías Renovables, REER, took place last 26th of January. In these 3,000 megawatts were awarded at a fixed minimum price of 24.47 for PV and 25.31 for wind projects. And this will last for the next coming 12 years. It is expected that at least 8 national and international lenders will be active. I mean, at least the same that are in the private PPPAs market, we understand. The offered leverage will be around 80%, we believe. The maximum debt term will be also 15 to 18 with mini perm and cash sweeps like in the PPA, private PPAs projects. The debt service coverage ratios during the REER project will be 1.50 to 1.25. This is similar to the subsidized projects. And during the merchant period, like in the merchant projects, is 1.45 to 1.50. The production scenario will consider that sizing will be 10 year P90. And it's expected that the lenders will also require their price estimations and advisors. Just to finally to remark the price and conditions, and we believe that they will run from a minimum of Euribor plus 175 to Euribor plus 2.75 with usually startups around 3.25. This is slightly cheaper than the private PPA projects. The hedge will remain around 70 to 75%. The structuring fees are expected about 2%. And the required debt service, as usually, will be the debt service reserve account, as usually will range from 6 months in the REER period, the public PPA, and will move to 12 months in the merchant period. So I hope, and just to finalize, I hope these 4 different type of projects, that conditions have been explained clearly. If not, please, well, if you have any question, please contact us and we'll be happy to answer. And now I will leave Oriol Salto, who finally, hopefully, has joined us, some minutes to introduce himself and to talk about the predictions.
Thank you very much, Antonio and Javier, for that detailed explanation of such interesting topics. And as Javier mentioned, now Oriol Salto, Data Analysis and Modeling Director of Aleasoft, we talk about the evolution of the European energy markets. Yeah, you have the slides now. Please, Oriol.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. My name is Oriol Salto. I'm in charge in data analysis and data modeling at Aleasoft, and I'll be the last speaker today. I'm usually the first one. Today I'll be the last one, and I will focus in the part of energy market evolution. First of all, a few words about our Aleasoft, our company, and the services that we offer. We basically offer forecasting services for all the European markets in all the time horizons. We forecast any variable that can be interesting for the energy sector, obviously market prices and market demand, but also renewable energy, weather variables, socioeconomic indexes, fuel prices, etc. And not only daily markets, but intraday markets and ancillary services also. We also make all kinds of market analysis reports. We make expert reports for court proceedings and lawsuits, analysis on the impact on market prices of new taxes or renewable auctions or the influence of CO2 prices. Basically, any kind of analysis about market prices and market conditions. Our methodology that we call Alea models or Alea methodology is a hybrid technology. It combines some classical statistical techniques like regression, econometric models, time series analysis, combined with more advanced methodologies like artificial intelligence, neural networks, and also machine learning algorithms. The main three characteristics of our methodology that we like to stress are that it is a completely scientifically based methodology that gives the forecast that we generate consistency and robustness over time. And what we can say better than we have been using it for more than 21 years, starting in the Iberian market and now covering all the markets in Europe. About the pandemics, well, we all know how things are going. Vaccination, the vaccination campaign continues in Europe. There have been quite a lot of setbacks, delays, but the campaign continues anyway. The number of infections and deaths due to the COVID it's declining. Governments are starting to remove the restrictions that they have on business activities and mobility, and somehow the economic recovery it's looking a little bit clearer. Most of the economists are thinking that they think that the worst part of this crisis is already over, and that we are now facing the recovery in the full path of the recovery. I'll start with the fuels markets and the CO2 emission rights. I always start with the oil prices. This is where we are right now in the annual average for what we are so far in 2021. And we see that we have basically already recovered the fall in the prices that we had last year in 2020. So we are basically close to the level of 2019 prices. A closer look of how the last month or last weeks the price has been evolving, and we see, as we will see in the case of the gas and the case of the CO2 emission allowances, the trend of the prices is clearly an upwards trend. So for the last since October, basically we have been basically non-stop raise, upwards raise of the prices, and right now we are reaching $70 per barrel in the case of the Brent oil. Similar picture in the in the gas. We had some in the last week, in the last month, we have some kind of going down with the prices, but right now we are again in a kind of what looks a new upwards race for the coming weeks. Even more clear is in the case of the CO2 prices. We are right now at historical high prices, reaching prices over 40 euros per ton of CO2. We will now see the daily detail of these prices, but basically it's clear that they are in we are at levels of historically high levels. I will go now to see how electricity markets have been doing. As always, I will not have time to go through all the markets, but I always mention that we have in Aleasoft we have services and products that can help you to follow the evolution of the energy markets. One of the services that we have is an Alea platform, is a data platform. I'll show you it live to see, and we will take the opportunity to see how the CO2 prices are right now at historical levels. So if we go to the fuels observatory, if it is okay, right now it's not responding. Very good. Let me check. Great. Oh, okay. Let me log in again. Okay, and I'll go to the fuels scenario Okay, CO2 emission spreads, and we see that at the beginning, at the beginning of the week, they reached up to close to 43 euros per ton. Right now they are a little bit lower, but we can go a little farther in history to see that they are. It is obviously historical record. So we are really at historical rates. And in this platform, you have access to all the data, future market, and all the data and variables from all the European electricity markets. So going back to my slides, here they are. Okay. Also in our website, you can see all the market reports that we have available for all the European markets. So basically, here is a summary of how the electricity demand has been evolving since January 2020 up to February 2021. So this is a year-on-year comparison, comparing every month with the same month of the previous year. And looking at the last month, that are January and February of this year, what we can basically see is that basically all the countries are reached the previous levels. So levels of demand that are similar, all of them are fluctuating around the previous levels, and even some countries like Poland, for instance, are in an clear upward trend of the increasing their electricity demand. The same comparison, but for the electricity market prices. And in this case, we can see that in February, in most of the countries, the prices were at least 50% higher than the prices that we had on January and February of 2020. January and February 2020 is before the crisis of the COVID restrictions. So these increases over that prices are really important. Over also, some countries doubled that prices. Germany, United Kingdom, they are above 100%. And countries like Spain or Portugal that are basically the same market, you can see that we have even seen a decrease in these prices. So it's compared to, for instance, France. There are two markets that are interconnected. In France, we have seen very high prices, while in Spain and Portugal, we have seen really low prices. And this is the daily evolution of the market price since February until yesterday, I think, or until today. And this has been actually so basically UK has had the highest prices, and during February, the average of the Spanish market in February was the lowest of all the European markets, even lower than the Nord Pool of the Nordic countries. That's something that didn't happen for the last 7 years. So usually Spain and Portugal has just above the average prices of the European market. So this February, thanks to the wind energy mainly, and also some good weather conditions with lower demand, led to these lower prices in the electricity market. So, and looking a bit into the future, these are the forward curves for the Brent oil. So basically, since the graph that I showed in the last webinar 1 month ago, just 1 month ago, what we have seen is an increase in the spot price of the Brent oil. So, and also it was accompanied by the increase in the forward curves, mainly in the midterm and short term, but also there has been a little increase around $0.50 per barrel in the equilibrium price at the very long term. It's not exactly the same case in the gas futures, where the prices in the forward curve in the short and midterm has increased a little bit due to the increases in the spot price, but the long-term price equilibrium around 50 euros per megawatt hour is stable, so it didn't change. and a completely different situation than what we see in the forward curve of the CO2 prices. The CO2 prices don't have right now an equilibrium price at the long term. So basically, if the short term price is if the spot prices changes, the forward curve basically move coherently up in all the maturities. So basically, the long term prices right now in 2030 are around 45 or 50 euros per ton. Sorry, this is euros per ton, not euros megawatt hour. And this long-term price is moving as the spot price is moving. So right now, as we are seeing record prices in the spot prices, we are also seeing record prices in the forward curves. And the forward curves for the power markets, here we have 4 of the main markets in Europe. All the forward curves are increasing since the last time that we saw them in last month. But the exception is Spain, where the forward curves, the prices for Cal 22, Cal 23 went up. So right now they are close to 50 euros per megawatt in Cal 22. But at the long term, the prices are still below 40 euros megawatt hour, and it's right now they are the lowest price in all the European markets. And looking into the future, so basically trying to see what we have seen in the evolution of the energy market that we have to take into account when we are making power market forecasts. So as we have seen, fuels prices, oil and gas, and the CO2 emission allowances prices are in a clear upward trend. In the case of electricity demand, the demand is fully recovered in basically in all the European countries. Electricity market prices has already overcome the levels that we have previous to the COVID crisis, but anyway, they are fluctuating. So we have, as we have seen in countries like Spain and Portugal, where the prices are now a little bit lower than they were in 2020, and in other countries like Spain, like France, Germany, and UK, they are twice what they were at the beginning of 2020. But basically these are fluctuations that are typical in this kind of energy markets. But the important is that the point around that they are fluctuating is already above the pre-crisis level. So in this case, we can say that electricity markets in this case are fully recovered. And as we said, the midterm outlook looks, so the uncertainty is kind of disappearing. We are always expecting what is what the COVID is bringing to us, but basically, as the situation, thanks to the vaccine also, and so this sentiment is kind of optimistic. The midterm outlook looks kind of optimistic and stable, let's say, in contrast to the uncertainty that we have during these hits of the pandemic that we have been having during last year. And looking at the long term, basically, the long term, despite the uncertainty that we have been having in the midterm and the short term, the long term, as always, it's looking quite stable. Renewable capacity targets for 2030 that we have seen that they have been explained to us recently. They are achievable thanks to the strength of the power sector that has been kind of keeping the financing of the projects even during the worst time of the pandemic, so stable. So and projects are developing and keep going, let's say. And Spain is in a very good condition of becoming in this mid-long term, becoming the hub, main producer of renewable energy in the south of the continent, thanks to the great resources in solar radiation and also wind resources. And So it basically, with the right investing, it can become this this hub in renewable energy production and green energy products, all coming from renewable energy. And just let me remind you the importance of having reliable price forecasting at the long term. It's an important input, critical input of financial models, and you have to be sure about your price forecasting in order to be in order to trust your financial model. And as we always remember, well-planned renewable energy products, renewable energy projects, always looking at the long term, they are always profitable. And just very few final remarks. Remember how the midterm is now more clear. Uncertainty is disappearing from the midterm right now. Gas, oil, and CO2 prices are in a clear upward trend, so it's important to keep an eye on the evolution of these prices. And at the long term, energy markets and energy sector, they have a clear vision and an optimistic clear vision of this long term. And just let me invite you already to the second part of this webinar. It will be held on April 15th, and in this case we will have invited panelists from Axpo. And that's all from my side. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you, Uriol. Great presentation as usual. We don't have much time available. We will answer only a couple of questions. I believe, Uriol, you already have a question ready. Can you answer it?
Yeah, sure. So I'll pick the one that is most interesting for me. In the case of long-term forecast, what does the report you submit contain, and how does it differentiate from other forecasting suppliers? Okay, that's interesting. As main differences, I would say that the methodology that we are using, it's a statistical methodology with different time aggregations that gives us flexibility. And as I said, it's robust and reliable and consistent over time forecast. So this, I would say, this is one of the main points, different from what the methodology that most of the other suppliers based more on these tricky market conditions that at the long term, we think they are not offering a reliable forecast. Other differences, we are providing not alternative scenarios as we usually understand alternative scenarios that are basically, you can choose which scenario is better for you. We are offering confidence band, so that gives you not only different possible prices for the future, but also what is the probability of each of these future scenarios. So this gives some numerical, you will not only have a price, but also a probability. So this is an input, a number that you can use in your model and create your risk profile, your risk management model, and this we think is a great advantage. And well, I would say these I would say are the main characteristics that differentiate our forecasting reports from other suppliers.
Thank you, Uriol. Unfortunately, that concludes the webinar today. We will answer the pending questions directly by email. And thank you again, Antonio, Javier, and Uriol, for your presentations, and the audience for joining. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.